welcome to this event organized by the Hub Entrepreneurship and Innovation of the University of Lausanne on the theme of social intrapreneurship. I'm Anne Hedden, the director of the Hub. So welcome to Vortex. We're here at live from Vortex, this amazing space. This is actually the second event we are holding here, and we're planning to hold all our next events here in November, hopefully managing to keep going through this kind of second wave of COVID. For that reason, this is an event without public. However, you are more than 100 participants online. So the idea is that actually you participate with us to the discussions and can ask questions. So please ask your question on the chat, and we will relay them to our guest speaker. For those who are not familiar with the Hub, very quickly a couple of words. The Hub was launched last year by the University of Lausanne. One hub, 7 faculties, entrepreneurial spirits. So here the mission the objective is really to build a community around entrepreneurship and innovation. Today we have a community of more than 2,000 people here at university. And our mission is triple. First, to foster entrepreneurial spirits within the community. Secondly, to better equip the community with for their professional life. I think today everybody agrees that entrepreneurial mindset, tool set, skill set is going to be useful whether you're an entrepreneur or not. And thirdly, to equip and support the entrepreneurial ideas and projects within our community with the UCreate programs. So that's it for the Hub. Let's kind of focus now on the theme of the event, the journey of a social intrapreneur. So before I go any further, let me maybe define and clarify what intrapreneurship is about. So an intrapreneur is somebody who behaves like an entrepreneur, but within an organization. So as such, he's an innovator, he's a driver of change, he's potentially a mover of shaker, he can be a corporate hero, he can be also a corporate insurgent. In any cases, he actually carries the entrepreneurial spirit. In some ways, it's easier than an entrepreneur. In some other ways, it's more difficult than an entrepreneur, and we'll cover this together. But we felt here at the university that was important actually to speak about this, because if we believe that there's potentially a third of the students who will be entrepreneur or self-employed during their career, that means that 2/3 will actually be working in companies. And we want to show that actually if you're wired like an entrepreneur, you can also be a source of change and an actor of change and have positive impact within that environment as well. So to speak about this, we welcome Gib Bulloch, who is an award-winning social intrapreneur, a writer. Now, Gib, I have to say, when I define, when I say definition like this, I find it's a very narrow way of defining you. Gib is also an activist. He's a change maker. He's driven by purpose, by passion, by resilience. And I had a chance to also kind of got to meet him. He's also a man of humility and humor. So Gib, very welcome here at the University of Lausanne.
Thank you, Anne.
We also welcome Florian Babst here. So because this event is without public, we're trying to have the voice of the students with us. So Florian represents the voice of the students. Florian is here a student at the HEC, the Business School of Lausanne, and is also the president of the last editions of the Prix Stratégie. So you've always been involved in entrepreneurship as well. Welcome, Gib. Welcome, Florian. Really, thank you for being here. So let's kind of start the journey here. And my first question to you, Gib, is what is actually your definition of intrapreneurship?
Well, it's great to be here, and it's such a refreshing change to be in a studio like this rather than being on a Zoom call, and what an amazing building. Entrepreneurship, what I'd say up front that's important is that it's it's not something you'll find on, a LinkedIn job application or a business card or a title. For me, it's the label isn't so important. It's the mindset. It's a skill set. It's somebody who believes potentially in the power of business to change the world, but also it's about the power of individuals to change the world of business. That's the important thing. The best definition I've heard, the most succinct definition, is a dreamer who does. A dreamer, you can all dream, but a dreamer who does and does something.
Okay, but thank you. We'll be holding this definition in our head for the next couple of minutes. So let's actually move to Accenture Development Partnership. So you have founded within Accenture Development Partnership. So in fact, Accenture Development Partnership leverages the expertise of Accenture, which is a huge company, consulting and technology company, to address social, economic, and environmental issues. So basically, you have on one hand this huge company, Accenture, which is for profit, which is employs almost 500,000 employees in 120 countries. And from that, you started Accenture Development Partnership, which is not for profit and which serves actually NGOs at a fraction of the price. How does it work?
You say it's a not-for-profit group. I prefer to actually call it a not-for-loss group. It's in fact both. So it was something of a hybrid business model and started way back in 2002, 2003. So we didn't use the labels that we maybe use now. I would now call it maybe a corporate social enterprise. And the way it worked was to try and have an unusual business model that almost turned the traditional consulting model on its head. Normal consultancies, as you'll know when you apply to them, are, take bright people like the ones on this call, you pay them a lot of money, you add on a overhead, you add on a margin, and clients like Nestle down the road or whoever will pay this amount. Flipping that around, we had an investment from the employees that was and is a contribution of their salary. Typically, they would work on half their salary, giving up half their salary, which sounds ridiculous, but it's a big investment. Accenture would give up and not charge the overhead or make profit on the work that we were doing. And then importantly, the charities that we were working with, the NGOs, would also pay something. Normally, pro bono is the tradition. We give away free things. Consultancies give free things. That, to my mind, the problem was it wasn't scalable, it wasn't sustainable. It maybe works okay in Lausanne or London or Paris or New York, not so good in Rwanda or Kampala or where it's most needed. So clients paid, but maybe they paid 10 or 20% of the normal rates. And my job was to try and make that whole thing break even. So not for profit, but also not for loss, self-sustaining and scalable.
Well, thank you for this explanation. So quite a very innovative business model at the time. So let's kind of think about the journey that you had as a social entrepreneur. You said you started in 2002. Where did the initial energy come from? What was the vision at the start?
Well, I'll tell you, the vision actually started before 2002. Because it's funny, actually. I think many people, many students listening to this will be thinking, when they're looking back in their life, when they're as old as I am, and in many decades' time, they'll be thinking about, the big events, getting married or the birth of a child or getting a new job. Or, in my experience, it's the small, seemingly insignificant little sparks, these little, like a cubic centimetre of chance that you get every now and again. And my cubic centimetre of chance was actually, I remember very vividly, March 1999. I read in the Financial Times, I was working in Accenture, I was going to a client site, I was working in London, and I was in the rat race, I was earning good money, I was having a jet-set lifestyle, but there was something missing for me. And then this article talked about the opportunity to volunteer in a developing country, to use my MBA, my business skills, applying it in a different context. And within a year, I found myself working as a volunteer in northern Macedonia, in the Balkans. I didn't even know where the country was on the map, but I was I was sent there and working with small businesses, helping them get access to credit, helping them with the beginnings of the internet as it was then. And that was, for me, it was like I discovered this drug, which was purpose and meaning in work, which had been missing before. And when I spent these long winter evenings in Macedonia, I was thinking, how much more could I get done if it wasn't just me on my own as a volunteer? Is there a business model that can, provide impact where it's most needed and where there's a lack of access? How could I bring my normal team that I was working with to this? And that's where the idea of that non-profit, not-for-loss business model came from. So while we got started in 2002, the initial spark was something as small, and it's the chain reaction that can happen just when you answer an email or make a call or decide to do something decisive. A butterfly flaps its wings and a monsoon takes place on the other side of the world. That's certainly my experience.
Well, thank you. So if we go back to the point that, okay, you start to have that vision, maybe you start to have the business model in the head. I can imagine that you spend a lot of time trying to convince all levels of the organization there is maybe another way of doing things, starting from the board to the top management, to the project managers, to the consultants. Actually, who was the most difficult to convince? Who got it? Who didn't get it?
Who got it? Who didn't get it? I would say the short answer to the question is probably the middle management were the biggest challenge. So the top management, I remember on my way back from this experience in Northern Macedonia, thinking about this concept and having the idea of, do I write 50 pages of PowerPoint? Do I write a long document? Do I create a financial Excel model? I wrote a story in a fake press release. It was a vision in the future. We can reinvent the future. We can create our futures to a certain extent by just changing the narrative in the present. And this was Accenture, 2 years in the future, launching this group in Davos to a big fanfare. And I got that sent to the chairman at that time. And the chairman was intrigued. He was used to people asking for a salary increase. So here's somebody asking for a salary decrease. I was going to offer my salary, so were many other people. We'd done a high-level business plan. So the senior leadership bought into the vision. They bought into that idea. The employees were queuing up to join. There's no problem there. It was almost like a lightning rod that attracted talent, good talent within Accenture. Today, just as a statistic, there are over 50,000 people on the interest list, the waiting list, to take a salary cut or work in far-off parts of the world. Now, you're all probably sitting there saying, I want to get out of being a student, I want to get the highest salary possible, this is crazy. But they're queuing up, and I don't know many companies that have that. But I think it's this attraction to be able to feel that you are doing something important, doing something that's more than just a job, you're actually impacting the planet in a positive way. The problem is in between the top people and there. The people who, nobody said it was a bad idea. But when it came to me needing to get a Florian, let's say a 25-year-old, I don't know what age you are, Florian, but let's say someone in their 20s, strong performer, and get them released from working for a corporate on a for-profit basis to working with the Global Fund, Save the Children, UNICEF, on a non-profit basis, that's when it was, I think it's great what you're doing, but not that person, not now, so there's a blockage. Middle management doing their job, enforcing the rules, are very difficult for entrepreneurs.
How did you convince them?
Guerrilla tactics to a certain extent. I had to convince them that in many ways, and that their best performers wanted to do this kind of program. And if you dangle a carrot, if the company was offering this proposition, join our company, have this opportunity to drive change and impact on the ground, if you don't follow through on dangling that carrot, then people will leave, people will be frustrated, people will see it's an empty promise. So I needed to convince them. And also I would say that when people went and did this experience, they were getting a leadership development experience that was incredible. I said, I'll take your people, I'll borrow them, I'll give them back after 6 months. They will be better. They will be more engaged. They will be more motivated. They will have new skills. They will have worked cross-culturally, across sectors sometimes, and internationally. So that was the package I was trying to offer.
And then just on this, convincing all all the different stakeholders, I can imagine at a certain point the board changed or the management changed. So then you have to start again? Or,
several times, yeah.
Or how did that go?
Not well. Very frustrating. So, and I should say up front, this was not, I'm making it out that this was one person leading this whole thing. I led the team, yeah. But I had surrounding me an amazing group of people from all around the world that were driving. We were a business within the business.
Yeah.
And we had support from the top people, but of course the top people don't stay forever. So when that senior chairman who I'd met for breakfast in 2000 retired, then I had to reconvince the replacement and then win the argument again that seemed to have been won in 2002, needed to be won in 2007, and then again in 2013. So it was difficult. Corporate memory is quite short.
Concerning the journey, Florian, do you have a couple of questions for Gib?
Yes, thanks. Let's imagine for a second that you couldn't convince top management or let's say the middle management to go along with your project. Do you think at some point you would have quit the company and look for more purpose somewhere else?
It's very difficult to say with hindsight, Florian, but I stayed in the end 20 years within Accenture. When I started doing this program, I'd been in 4 years, I think. I could not think that I would have stayed 20 years. Nobody joins a company and thinks nowadays that they would stay that long. But I was the luckiest guy. I got my own piece of the train set to play with, and I was staying there. I had the choice, and this is the difference between entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. Yes, I could have left and tried to get a few people together and do a startup, and startups are very sexy, and everybody start talking about new ventures and being an entrepreneur. But it was a conscious decision to stay put and to try to drive it within this huge organization. A supertanker, I sometimes talk about the idea of, if you can get a supertanker like Accenture or a Nestle or a Swiss Re or any of these organizations, moving 1 degree this way, 1 degree more sustainable, 1 degree less plastic, 1 degree more impact, then that can be worth 1,000 little speedboats and little startups and things like that. So the answer to your question, I reckon I would have left, but who knows? Who knows what happens? You take your chances when they happen, and you face the consequences.
And as a follow-up question, would you consider that the Accenture Development Partnerships program became, over the years, a key element not only to attract talent within the company, but then to retain them?
It was both. And we focused a lot on the attracting talent, but it was also very powerful to retain talent. A couple of years before I left the company, and I've left now, but Shan, you'll probably come to that, but INSEAD, a lesser university than the University of Lausanne, they did a study and they interviewed many, many people, some of whom had left, some of whom had stayed. And they did a regression analysis, and they reckoned that the attrition rate, the number of people leaving amongst the high performers was reduced by 32%, I believe. So almost a third reduction in the high performer attrition. That is really worth a lot of value. So even though the company wasn't making money, profit, as in francs or dollars, there was a huge business benefit in what we were doing.
Thank you.
So actually, it's a good. Let's speak about the impact. Let's kind of go further into that. We'll go back. You left Accenture in 2016.
January. Yeah.
when you kind of, at that time, what kind of impact had you created or the team created with Accenture Development Partnership? How did you measure it?
Probably in many of the wrong ways, I would say. A little funny story. I used to get, I was lucky. I got promoted and became a partner in the firm or a managing director. And every month, every managing director would get the performance scorecard. And they still kept sending me the traditional scorecard. And I just get this monthly report that was just lines and lines of zeros. You know, how much profit, how much growth, how much. So I would get these things. I actually printed one out and made it in a frame and put it on my wall that I was able to stay in this company where my performance was just 0, 0, 0. I did have a separate set of metrics that I was measured on. They were quite different. And again, this is the important thing for entrepreneurship. You can't use the same business metrics if you're wanting to create an entrepreneurial startup. And it was things like retention of high performers. It was things like number of projects and things. And I can tell you in our first decade, and we were going, but in the first decade, I think we provided about $250 million worth of consulting services in over 80 countries around the world, involving thousands of Accenture staff, and you know, doing all sorts of interesting projects. And I would say that there is no way I could have done a startup on the outside that would have got to that scale. The only way we could get to that scale, was by having the power of the organization behind us and the scale of the organization behind us.
And then if we kind of look at this more on the personal point of view, what is actually the impact or the achievement that you are the proudest about? If you look at this, 2002, 2016, this period.
Well, one of the things I'm most proud about is that it's still going.
Mm-hmm.
It's still going, and it's interesting. Not only is it doing projects, and there's lots of people now working that I'd never met, and just last week I was asked to attend a leaving event for one of the longest serving person in ADP, who was our head of HR, and she joined me in January 2003, and she's just left almost 18 years later from the company. So I'm very proud that it gave people careers. Not only the people who stayed in the firm, but actually it seeded so many people that went off into the development sector with their business skills, with their innovation skills. And so many organizations like the Global Fund, like Gavi, like Red Cross, have business people now in them, which is, so there's many things I'm proud of. I'm proud of the achievements that our team did.
So since 2016, it has been integrated, I think further integrated even into Accenture.
I would say so, probably.
It's been further developed, which is the absolute, fantastic outcome. How do you think the vision today compares to the one you had in 2002?
In some ways, it's a fantastic outcome that it can become part of the bloodstream of the organization, that it's still going, that I believe it's having its biggest year ever this year. There's hundreds of people out on projects as I speak. I think, despite the current, I don't want to talk about the current but I think that there's part of me, though, as well, misses a little bit the edginess of something that was more guerrilla movement.
Yeah.
I talk in the book about corporate insurgency.
Yeah.
That we were quite radical. We were trying new things, and the trouble is, if you get too much, if entrepreneurship gets too much mainstreamized, then you're co-opted into doing what business does. And I'm certainly of the view that business has to radically change itself. It has to be disrupted. And maybe some of that edgy disruptiveness has been lost. But I'm just a troublemaker at heart.
I won't contradict you. Florian, a couple of questions on impact, maybe?
Yes, I read on Accenture's website that more than 1,600 projects have been completed since 2003.
Great.
Is there one project concretely you would like to talk a bit about tonight?
Yes, there could be many that I really liked. The kinds of projects we were doing were initially it was just working directly with NGOs, so we'd go and improve their processes or their technology in the back office. We do project management. A lot of the stuff was using mobile phones to do things more innovatively. I did like things like e-learning platforms that we worked on in terms of bringing technology. But my favourite project, I think, still is one that was much more collaborative. So after we worked just jointly with NGOs, we started to find ourselves with Accenture's commercial clients, the business clients. This was by 2009-10, they were all talking about shared value. Nestle talks about shared value. They talk about sustainability. They talk about inclusive business and all these terms. So we found ourselves sometimes at the nexus, convening to bring together corporates with NGOs, with maybe donors that would give money. And so I loved the project we did with Coca-Cola, which wasn't about getting, it was about medicine access, not to use Coca-Cola trucks to deliver medicines, but to use a technology transfer, a knowledge transfer of Coca-Cola's logistics expertise and their inventory management to improve the health system of many countries in Africa. And we'd have, I think there was about 6 of our people on half salary from our supply chain division, starting off in Tanzania, working with the Global Fund and Coca-Cola's local bottlers. And you could reduce the lead time of essential medicines from something like 30 days down to 3 in some cases. You could, I think we identified cost savings of about 25% on the health logistics costs of the health system in Tanzania. So I love that idea of these coalitions. There were many like that, but I think that's a project I can explain to my mother who's never worked in business and she understands it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to the new digital technologies, would you say that now one single project could have more impact, a greater impact, and reach to more people than it used to in the years early 2000?
Absolutely, and I'm probably even not familiar with some of the latest things where, development, the whole area of development is going digital. We're seeing that, the mobile phone becomes the bank account for the unbanked. The e-learning project I talked about, where we were training nurses in Kenya who were trained normally in classrooms, we could train them by the thousand in using e-learning platforms. That's now gone to mHealth. So we're starting to see when the last Ebola outbreak came, I don't know what's happening with the current pandemic, but when the Ebola outbreak came, we had community health workers empowered with mobile phones, getting push information out to them, almost like a WhatsApp type thing for community health workers, where they could respond and treat symptoms and be trained remotely through relatively basic devices. So the technology at the moment is, in the same way it's transforming every industry, it's transforming the development sector as well. And the fact that Accenture has technology at its core is fantastic for me to see how that can be applied in a different context for a different impact.
Thank you, Gib. I'd like to speak about your book. I have a copy
I thought you'd never ask, Anne.
Oh, yeah. I have a copy of your book here. I even have one at home, which is...
You even read it, I think.
I even read it, exactly. Confessions of a Corporate Insurgent. So I can
It's
see...
a subtle title, isn't it?
Exactly. I can recognize you here. Very simple question. Why this book? Why did you write this book?
Well, as you say, it's a simple question. I'll give you a simple answer. I've talked tonight so far about this great success story and how it was going well and all the good things, and it's a bit boring maybe for some of the students just to hear this story that everything seems to go super well. The catch in the story is that I guess I was working extremely hard to try and keep this thing alive. I talked about having to reconvince some of the leadership each time. I also talk in the book, well, I talked before the book about the concept of a corporate immune system. So when you're trying to do something in business that isn't about maximizing profit in the short term, then the antibodies, this kind of invisible kind of antibodies of I don't know, culture and performance management expectations and attitudes of leadership, many things conspire against you. So it was getting harder for me, harder for the team. And in the end, I had a burnout, I guess, or breakdown. And this is one of the main reasons for writing the book, is that I felt that I had to stand up and be counted, to talk about this experience. If I just said I had been ill for a few months or I left, and I felt I wouldn't be being fully honest.
Yeah.
And there is a huge issue with mental health in the workplace. There's a huge issue with mental health in university campuses, I'm sure. And people don't talk about it, especially senior people in business. And I wasn't that senior, but I was senior enough. And I'm a man. And, you know, male mental health, we're all meant to be strong and bulletproof. And I thought I was bulletproof. But ironically, the more you make yourself vulnerable and talk about things honestly, I actually feel stronger now talking about these things. So that was maybe the main catalyst. But I also wanted to tell a story. So it's partly mental health, but it's also not just looking at the mental health of the individual. I think we need to look at the mental health of the system in which you're working. So the book is it's a story set in the context of me in a psychiatric hospital for 5 days. I never thought that was going to happen to me. But it's set in that context, and it's really saying, did I go crazy, or is it the system I was trying to change? It's holding a mirror up to the system, and it's saying, let's look at the mental health of the organizations in which we're working. And if businesses' response is to, you know, give pinball tables at the cafeterias, or yoga at the desk, or fruit in the desk, or gym memberships, I think it's missing the point. I think business needs to fundamentally rethink what it does, who it serves, what its purpose is in the world, if it's to attract talent and retain talent. And at the moment, people are disengaged, they're unhappy in many ways, they're working too hard, and we need to change that around. So it's again back to the storytelling thing. It's trying to tell a story. There's goodies and there's baddies and there's ups and downs and bullies, but it's trying to tell a story that talks about mental health, but in the way of actually inspiring people that they can drive change and look after themselves at the same time. Don't make the same mistakes I did. Maybe do it differently.
I really enjoyed actually reading your book. I mean, Paul.
You have to say that tonight.
No, I don't have to say that actually, Gib. I'll quote. There is a foreword by Paul Polman, the ex-CEO of Unilever, who is also a man obviously very much involved in business as a force for good and social impact. He writes a story of courage, determination, and persistence, told with a combination of pathos and refreshing honesty. And it's true that you're making yourself publicly vulnerable when you describe you describe yourself in just after this breakdown, which again, very rare. It takes quite a bit of a courage to do that, potentially, especially for a man. Did you hesitate at any point?
Oh yeah, of course. And you know, it is a very personal story. Yeah. But again, back to this point about vulnerability, and also morality to a certain extent. There's a concept in English called lying by omission. It doesn't mean to say you tell a lie. It means you don't tell the full truth. And I felt that if I didn't stand up and be counted, especially me in my position, I didn't have to worry too much about having a career in the future. I'd like to think that if I was your age, Florian, that I would have the courage to talk openly when I knew I still had job interviews to do and career to manage and things. It was easy for me to do this at my stage. And if somebody like me couldn't stand up and be counted and say, this happened to me, I didn't expect it to happen to me, you know, take precautions so that it doesn't happen to you, I think I wouldn't have been true to myself, and I think I would have been lying by omission. So, but again, vulnerability to this point is, I think, a source of strength. We shouldn't shy away from being vulnerable. I think it also, I wanted to write a book that was authentic.
Yeah.
So you get my authentic self in here. You know, we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses.
Now, when I read the book as well, I mean, your journey, the entrepreneurship journey comes very much to life with all the issues you had, with this, you know, again, convincing the stakeholders, the ups and the downs. And I kind of asked myself the question, do you think it would have been easier today? Do you think the corporate world has changed to the point that they get it actually, that if you want to keep these entrepreneurs, these corporate heroes, you actually need to help them out a little bit, because otherwise they will potentially leave or burn out, or, you know, at certain points, you know, there's enough of a challenge that people can take. What do you think?
If it would be easier today versus, I have to think, and I'm not just saying this because it was kind of tough in the early stages, but if I think back, now we talk about these terms of corporate social responsibility. Almost, when we were starting this thing, corporate social responsibility hadn't really been talked about a lot.
Yeah.
It's kind of come and gone, and then it's been replaced a bit by inclusive business. I mentioned shared value and all these other terms. So I would like to think that where we had the wind was maybe on our faces. If you're an entrepreneur now, the wind is more on your backs. Businesses have definitely embraced this agenda. There are movements around entrepreneurship. The League of Entrepreneurs is something, I'm on the board of the League of Entrepreneurs. That's been going for a few years, where people can actually have it's almost like, I probably shouldn't say this, but it's like Alcoholics Anonymous for entrepreneurs. You know, people who are struggling in their company can go and
Share their
moan
stories,
to each other, share, oh, my boss is an asshole, and oh, so is mine, and it's so hard, and do you have tips for how you... So people are sharing best practice, the circle of entrepreneurs. The Schwab Foundation down the road in Geneva has a new category. They were all about social entrepreneurship. They now have a category, entrepreneurship. So it's now becoming mainstream. Maybe mainstream's too strong a term, but it's now become much more accepted to do this. And that's maybe something that I'm very, very happy about. We need to see more entrepreneurs. We need to see companies tapping into the innovation potential of their best performers. At the moment, my belief is that there's probably many Elon Musk type characters and their female equivalents in business who have either burnt out, left already, disengaged. How do you retain the Elon Musks, engage and inspire them? That would be my view, and it's entrepreneurship. Yeah.
So that's the good news. So it seems to be there's a bigger awareness of actually what it takes and potentially how important that is.
There was a Global Entrepreneurship Week for the first time this year in June. #GIW. Over 3,000 people signed up for Global Entrepreneurship Week that was organised by the League of Entrepreneurs. It was a sort of mass gathering online. So that's a big indicator that this thing is starting to take off, starting to trend.
Gib, I'm going to backtrack a little bit to take some questions from the audience.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there are some audience people then?
There are some audience people who I have them here. Many questions about how do you choose the project you work on? Can you select it? So, you know, when we go back to the examples of the questions of Florian about what kind of projects and mm-hmm. Is there choice for the consultant? How does it work, actually?
Oh, choice for the consultant versus choice for us. So the choice of projects.
Both, exactly.
In the early days, it was very hard. I have to say that up front. We would work with whoever would work with us. And I can tell you plenty of funny stories where I'd call up Save the Children or Oxfam, and you say you're from Accenture. Ah, right, okay. If you've got money to give us, you know, send the check there. And I said, no, actually, I want to talk to you about an opportunity for you to give us money and we'll give you people. And phone would sometimes go down. Eventually, some got the idea. They found out that for 10% of the normal rates. They could get our brightest and best people wherever they wanted them.
Yeah.
So we'd work with the organisations who saw the benefit. For the individuals, there was a degree of choice in which projects they would go for, but we were constantly trying to match up between, here's a project that has your skills, people can apply for it internally, but then they have to be available. So they might have 2 months left on the current project they're on, this project starting in 1 month. So there's a dance between their availability, their interests, their skill set, and what the clients will pay for. So it's not easy.
Yeah, I can imagine that from an HR point of view.
Oh yeah.
I have another question here that is interesting. Did you guerrilla? How do you say guerrilla?
Guerrilla
movement.
Not the animal, but the
guerrilla movement inside Accenture had an impact on how Accenture conducted their other jobs of consulting. You know, that's how there is something, you know, from Accenture to Accenture Development Partnership. How does it have an impact on the overall institutional culture?
I'm convinced it probably did, and I can say a couple of anecdotes that are quite pertinent. I'm sure most people who did a project, did their 6 months, some would come back and do a second project. Some would go back. So if you were 5 years in Accenture, you may have done 2 or 3 projects for 6 months each time. You're obviously going to bring that mindset into the projects that you do with the commercial clients.
Yeah.
I would say also that we were a catalyst for creating a sustainability department in Accenture, which was doing sustainability work on a for-profit basis with the commercial clients. And I'll give one shout out to a good friend and colleague of mine who joined and led the sustainability practice that we pushed for. A guy called Peter Lacey that some of you will have heard of. He's a young global leader at the World Economic Forum. He headed up sustainability, and then I think it was last week I've just read that he's gone up the ladder, and now he has become the chief responsibility manager on the executive committee, the highest committee of this 500,000 organisation. He has managed to put responsibility up there. So I'd like to think that this was something of a catalyst towards getting this into the bloodstream of the firm, and Peter's just an amazing guy that's managed to get to the very top there.
Question now about a couple of questions about the future. You are now working on another project.
There's always projects.
There's always projects. It's in Scotland, and it's called something that is very difficult for me to pronounce. Something like Gib Bulloch.
Pretty good.
Please forgive me. Can you actually tell us a bit more about this project? You know, there is a decelerator lab, and this is interesting. You know, new wording in the times of accelerators and so on.
Something in that. Well, the first thing. So some of you may have noticed that my accent is in fact Scottish, and. I can say that if you don't understand my accent very well, then don't get the audio book. You should get the digital book of this. But Gib Bulloch is, so that's the Scottish term. Gib Bulloch, it means, in Gaelic, it means jagged rock. But it's the name of a farm on the island that I grew up on. I grew up on a Scottish island. And I'm trying to, as your slides suggest, create a business decelerator. So yes, everyone in business is about faster and bigger and more profitable. And I'm, again, as a bit of an insurgent, trying to say, well, maybe the right answer might be something different. So it's a juxtaposition. It's saying maybe the best way to drive change might be to start by slowing down. And my belief is that in business at the moment, people are so busy, working all the hours. They're on this, we say, hamster wheel that's spinning faster and faster and faster, 60-hour weeks, 70-hour weeks. How can you be innovative? How can you be inspired in your 70th hour of a working week? We're burning people out, they're disengaged, they're unhappy, we have mental health issues. So I'm trying to say, first of all, we need to slow people down, but not just to sit and meditate and Dalai Lama-esque, but to slow people down so that they connect with themselves. And then we're going to take them to the Scottish island. This is a picture of us in water, but connect people to nature, connect people to music, improv theatre, art, and really get that right brain. That business tends to ignore the right brain. Business is all about the left brain. Numbers, growth, statistics, logic. The right brain is where the inspiration, the creativity comes from. And that's what I'm trying to do with the decelerator, is to awaken the next generation of entrepreneurs. I almost believe that there are entrepreneurs dormant, sleeping inside big companies, and all they need to do is be woken and shaken up. But if we've got collective attention deficit disorder, if we're too busy, we'll never wake up. So let's start by slowing down.
So very interesting. So who is coming to that? Is it your typical, senior?
Some of this audience might come to.
They might as soon as we can.
I'll do a deal.
So who is the typical person coming to you?
Well, it's interesting. It's very much intergenerational. We started off, it's not the best time to be launching a new social enterprise like this.
Yeah.
But we started off almost a year ago and took a bunch of people to the island, senior people from, partners from Deloitte, senior brand managers from Reckitt Benckiser. We had bankers from Standard Chartered in Hong Kong. We'd bring them to this island, but also connect them to local people. So I offer 5 free places to local inhabitants from the community. So maybe a girl who runs a shop, she's 30 years old, a retired teacher perhaps. And when you bring that dynamic together of business people together with normal community people, and also NGOs were in there as well. And we mix them all up. There's only one rule. You don't talk about what you do for a living.
Okay.
You talk about who you are. So everyone has something to bring, whether you're a 25-year-old business student or whether you're a senior partner somewhere or whether you're somebody from the community. And that mixture, that dynamic, we found was very, very powerful to really get people thinking very differently about their role and not defining themselves by a title in a business card.
And so how does your experience as with Accenture and you kind of yourself as a social entrepreneur, how does it actually link to that, to your new project? What is there a strong link? Is it for you, how?
There is. I was convinced a couple of years ago, I was thinking about what do I want to do for the next time. I'm not ready to retire and go onto the golf course and whatever people that are retired do. I've still got fire in the belly. And I'm very interested in how we drive change in big business, how we can get these huge organizations to go in different directions, and entrepreneurship. But I wanted to do something back in Scotland, in this community where I grew up. I wanted to give something back there. And I thought these two things was, the big picture and the small picture were pushing apart. But then I felt if I could find a space that would be the space to actually waken up the entrepreneurs, to inspire and engage the entrepreneurs, to get them the same. I found that this island was a place for solitude for me. When I was finding it really tough with the corporate immune system kicking in, I would go there and breathe nature, be near the sea, linked to community and normal people and get grounded again. Well, maybe that could be used for other people as well. Yeah. And these two things came together. An old farm came on the market 2 weeks later. I bought that with my money I left Accenture with, and then it's just growing. There's a North Star direction, but where it moves to, I just don't know. It's very emergent. I've started letting go of the controls sometimes and just following, I don't know, instinct in some ways. It's a different way. I was programmed to plan. I still have that in the DNA, but now I'm trying to let go and let new things emerge, and it's super fun. I've got all sorts of, extreme artists and improv comedy people and singers and people that don't normally mix with business, and they're all coming on board with this project, which is great fun.
Fascinating. Farron, I don't know if you have a question about the project in Scotland, or what does it, the kind of things that come to mind as a student there?
I mean, it sounds great. Just maybe a little question. It seems when I hear you that we almost have two different kind of people on the planet. We have the normal people and partners or senior management. It's kind of a bit worrying to hear that this big difference
between normal people and I'm not sure what normal is actually, and if I knew what it was, I'm not sure I'd want to be it. Normal, but I think when you're in 8-degree water in the Scottish island in last November, and you're wearing just your swimming trunks and things, it's a very that is a very normalizing effect. Everyone is back to basics. No one's got we hide behind these big titles and these CVs and these LinkedIn profiles and all these achievements that most people want to talk about. But when you're in there, you're all the same. It's a leveler. And that's where I think that, potentially the amazing woman that runs the shop in a clothes shop on the island, she might not have the answer to climate change, but she may have the question or the inspiration or the trigger that could inspire somebody in a big business that starts to innovate and do something differently. So I think that's where the diversity isn't just about, people that look differently or act differently. It's about diversity of thought as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. We are slowly approaching the end of our
what
time. So I'd
what
like
a shame.
I'd like to take some more questions of the audience. So they
Oh,
might
please.
take us back to to the journey.
It's no problem.
One question: some companies might use social entrepreneurship as a way to show good behavior in terms of CSR instrumentalizing the project, but without really changing mindsets. What are your views on that?
Yes, would be the answer. I apologies to anyone, well, probably as students, you won't really have jobs, or you might have relations who are in corporate social responsibility. I'll tell you up front, and I'm very open the book. I'm not a fan of corporate social responsibility, generally. And that might sound a silly thing to say, but I spent most of my time in Accenture Development Partnerships distancing myself from corporate social responsibility. I see it as sometimes the enemy of the entrepreneur, because I was trying to drive something. I had a P&L. I had numbers. I had targets. I was trying to drive it within the business as a business. And the corporate responsibility departments, they're more sophisticated than they were many years ago, but often they are seen as being fig leaves of responsibility. We do bad things over here, and then we put some lipstick on the stuff over here. We give some money to charities, we do some philanthropy, we sponsor the arts. I didn't want to be associated with that. I wanted to be associated with doing business in a different way. So entrepreneurs, watch out for CSR. And I would say associate yourself much more with driving something and scaling something within the business than something that is seen as being philanthropic.
And do you think in that sense that CSR is changing as well today? Even to go more, even some departments are kind of changing titles to go from CSR officer to sustainability officer. I'm not quite sure whether it does change something in the essence. What's happening out there?
Definitely things are changing, and companies are relabeling what they're doing. But the key thing is that we cannot just have 10 people in a CSR department or a sustainability department as doing the good for the company, while the other 98% of the company, 99% of the company is just doing business as usual. For me, this has to get into the bloodstream of the company, where it's everyone's job is corporate responsibility. We were talking just before this session about employee activism, and this is something that I would want to put out there to students to be a bit of a provocateur to you, Florian, as well as an idea. But entrepreneurship is creating a new business or a new product or a new service, being an entrepreneur inside the business. The risks of it are that if you put your head up as one person, then it can be dangerous, and I've talked all about that, or you end up in a hospital. I think it's very exciting to see the activists starting to drive change within companies. You'll see 20,000 Google employees, ununionized employees, walk out because of the company's stance towards paying off senior businessmen that had been, guilty of not very good conduct to women in the company. I love, Microsoft. Engineers in Microsoft decided to basically withdraw their labor when the US government was using their software to separate Mexican immigrants on the southern border from their parents. And they said, no, we don't want to work for a company that's doing this. They sent 100 sent a letter to the CEO. The 100 became several thousand, and Microsoft were forced to cancel the contract and bring human rights into all their future contracts. You would think that maybe human rights should have been something that would have always been in their contracts, but so that one person that had the idea to write a letter, get 100 signatures that became 4,000. So you are better connected than I ever was when I was at that stage. You have all the tools of Facebook to, Instagram to everything. You can connect really well. And I think tails can wag dogs. And the people at the bottom of the company, when you start your career, you might be the lowest, but you're the most numerous. And the people at the top, you need to look out and need to listen. Because if you get your act together and you are speaking as 10,000, which company can ignore 10,000 voices saying more sustainable, less plastic, less pollution, more impact on the SDGs? How can you possibly ignore that? So employee activism is the way forward.
Thank you. Well, you'll keep
Stir
that
you
in
up.
mind, Florian.
I'll keep that in mind.
Safety in numbers.
I'll take a last question
Yeah.
from the audience, and then we'll try to close up. How much did you have to compromise between your original values and vision, as you established ADP?
I'm not very good at compromise. You can ask my partner. But of course, there had to be certain compromises all the way along. There were certain red lines, and I think we have to all, in all walks of life, have our boundaries as to what is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
A lot of people were pushing and saying, when we had this salary reduction that I felt was absolutely critical to our business, absolutely critical to that everyone was investing something in the business. And some people would say, oh no, we should reduce that, we're a big company, people should be able to have full salaries. I resisted, but you choose your battles. On other things, I would have to compromise or choose to fight that battle another day. So inevitably, there's times when you have to compromise, when you have to give. But knowing what is non-negotiable is very, very important. To stay true to who you are and what you're about is very, very important. As an entrepreneur, there will be plenty of people trying to dilute or bash down what you're trying to do.
Actually, I will take a last question. This will be the last question, but I think it's an interesting one. It's on impact and on metrics.
Yeah.
What were the metrics you communicated to the top management in order to convince them to pursue? You were speaking about your balance sheet and then the zero. That was definitely not going to make it. What is the matrix you took up to the board?
In the beginning, it was going back to this fake story, I suppose. There was very little in the way of metrics in there. And this is something that I think is important, that we think we have to hit numbers or targets or scale or growth, whereas telling a story, I guess I managed to get their buy-in to a story, a future story, how things could be, imagining the future. And that was much more powerful than numbers. The metrics came afterwards. And, I had my set of metrics, as I mentioned, that I was trying to work towards that were important for the business. But I would answer to say in the beginning, inspire with story, inspire with how things could be, inspire with a narrative rather than numbers.
Okay. And then when the matrix came, so point taken, when the
Yes.
matrix came, what was the kind of maybe one matrix that the management, the board was looking at?
It was mostly around people. Mostly around people. So this 32% reduction in high performing, well, that obviously came many years later that we understood that better. And actually it was close to when I was leaving that came in. But we also, it was interesting, I had quite a powerful graph. I wish I could show it up here. But Accenture, like most companies, would do employee surveys every year to understand were you learning new things on a project, were you more likely to stay with the company, various metrics. And we would have a bar chart whereby there was the normal average in the company and people who had done our projects. And on many of these key metrics, we'd signed this big difference of 20, 30% uplift on some of the key metrics. So we say, there's the normal average, and there's where we are. That people were learning more, they were more likely to stay, they were felt better about their job, they were more engaged. And that one slide, there's always a killer slide in any presentation. And that was a kind of killer slide that really got their attention. Yeah.
Well, Gib, thanks so much. It is 7 o'clock, so we'll slowly go to a close. Last question to you. You know, this is an audience of mostly students. Do you have a last word for them?
A last word. I would have many last words. Well, firstly, thank you for listening, those of you who are still on. And thank you also to Florian for being the voice of the students and things like that. I guess my last word would be, and thank you, Anne, for asking the questions, but I'm focusing really on Florian because I talk sometimes, spend a lot of time in the mountains outside of here, and you see across there, and sometimes you see this, it's called the temperature inversion, where you see the cloud in the valleys and the sun on the top. And I think there's something analogous to that in terms of leadership in business at the moment. Conventional wisdom says the more higher up the company you go, the smarter you are, the better paid you are, the more knowledge you have. Yes, on some things, but on this topic, on sustainability, on purpose, on responsible business, I actually think that the knowledge is inversely proportionate. That the people in the most senior parts of business have not been listening to talks around responsibility. They were not educated at business schools where this was on the agenda. So you are more knowledgeable than the more senior people in business. You have more to gain and less to lose by being entrepreneurs, by being activists. So before it gets too late, make sure you go in with an intention into business and know that you know, this is something that 30 years of extra seniority in business is actually a disadvantage, and that less experience and more passion is the advantage. And you can really drive change. You really can. Individually, collectively, just do it. And you know, it's not going to be about the money you make. Have a career. You know, it's much more interesting to make a difference than make a fortune. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Gib. That piece of advice.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This is probably exactly the best piece of advice.
If you make a fortune as well and make a difference, that's even better. But
to give to that generation. Thank you so much. It is time for thank you. So Gib, huge thank you.
Most welcome.
Really an honor. I really think our audience has really understood what entrepreneurship is about and what social entrepreneurship is about. Florian, thank you to represent the students here tonight.
My pleasure.
Thank you to Melanie from the Hub who has organized this event, and thank you to the technical team, Innovation Time, who is behind the camera. It's all gone very smoothly, I think, on the technical side tonight, so well done. So I think this is it for us. Maybe just a little quick reminder for our next event. We'll be going back to speaking about sustainability. Just a little reminder that we have the Global Entrepreneurship Week here on the campus of UNIL from November the 16th to November the 19th, so 4 days. This is organized by the students, for the students. And the hub will actually organize the opening event with around, again, business as a force for good and the responsibility of entrepreneurs and companies towards sustainability. So we'll go back to some of this, the themes that we have covered today. With also an amazing for guest speakers. So thank you, everybody. And again, thanks so much for coming here in Lausanne at the Vortex today.
It's a pleasure.
Bye.
Good luck in everything in their careers.
Thanks, bye.